Welcome back to Future Dreamers. This is a big episode. We're going to cover the entire wheel of the Zodiac. It's the most recognizable piece in astrology. You all would know it from the back of tabloid magazines, but oh my gosh, it is such a much deeper, much richer topic than that. So I'm going to do my best to do it justice. So much to explain, but my goal is that we do this in an hour. And the reason I'm recording these episodes, if you didn't listen to my episode on the system of the houses, go back and check that one out. If you didn't listen to my episode on how to understand your psyche through the archetypal cast of characters that are the planets in astrology, go back and give that one a listen. But this episode on the Zodiac is where we really get deep into understanding human consciousness. And I'm going to record one more episode on the aspects, and those 4 episodes will really give you such a clear baseline understanding of what are all the components of astrology, how do they come together, because astrology is all about synthesis, it's all about integration, and those are the 4 main things you need to kind of understand, the 4 domains of astrology that will get you really through the osmosis of listening to these episodes in a place where you can start to use your own astrology. Because if you listen to my content on Instagram, that is my core desire, is to make astrology usable for you in your real life, because it is so fun and it's beautiful self-care to have an astrologer interpret your birth chart. But after that hour or so is over, if you don't do anything with it, if you don't take that understanding and reflection of your cosmic self into your own body, your own awareness, and then use it, it's no good. So that is why I do the work I do, because astrology is such a deep system to not only see yourself from the reflection of the universe and when the universe dropped you on earth with the mission that you've got to live out, but it is about using it for yourself. And in order to use it for yourself, you've got to understand it. So let's get into this topic of the Zodiac. Okay, so I'm going to enter from this kind of point. The Zodiac is based on the seasons. We look at it, mapping the seasons to the constellations in the sky. And there is a whole realm of understanding the Zodiac that is a more esoteric understanding of zodiacal energies as a universal matrix that I'll probably do a deeper dive episode on some other time. But from this entry point, let's really keep this as a concept that really helps us understand nature and understand ourselves through the seasons of nature. And so we're jumping into this pool from the end of the Zodiac is a map of the seasons as they occur on Earth. And let's double tap one level deeper into that. So we know if we're really going at this from the concept of nature. In nature, we have elements. Let's dig into those. We have fire, we have earth, we have air, we have water. Each of those elements corresponds to different mathematical dimensions. So we're going to get into math because astrology is all about math. Astrology is the mythopoetic math of the universal cycles that we are all living and developing and evolving through. So understanding that, let's go with the first dimension, which, if you know about geometry, is a straight line. That is the energy of fire. It is cosmic energy, straight lines pointing down from the cosmos, in our case, towards Earth. Then we have we add the second dimension. That is the surface area. So if you have a straight line that goes from one to the other, one line to another, that's surface area. The third dimension adds volume. So if you draw a third line, then you give a 3-dimensional picture and understanding of a tangible environment. Then you add the fourth dimension, which is time. And so now we're going to add the concept of the Zodiac to this. And so as we kind of get into understanding this entire topic, we're keeping in mind nature, we're keeping in mind elements, we're keeping in mind dimensions from 1 to 4, and we're also going to add on cardinality. Cardinality basically means, are we in the energy of initiation? Are we in the energy of sustaining a form of growth? Or are we in the energy of adapting to the next season of growth? Always, with the Zodiac, keeping in mind that we are mapping this to the natural seasons of how nature flows from one season of growth to another, and then in cycles, because astrology is all about cycles. What cycle are we ending? What cycle are we moving into? Or are we in the middle, beginning, middle, and end? So it's a lot of elements to put together, but maybe listen to this episode twice. Okay, so let's get into it this way. In the beginning of spring, we have the first sign of the zodiac, which is the energy of Aries, the sign of Aries. It is when spring is awakening from the dead of winter. It is the first dimension. It is the element of fire. When a seed pops out of, when a seed has absorbed enough water to kind of like get its shell loose and ready to kind of let the shoot begin to eject itself from the cocoon of the seed, which is a remnant of an old life cycle. So when we talk about Pisces, which is the end of the zodiacal matrix, that's when the seed has formed, death has occurred, but it is written its story to be rebirthed in a new cycle into the seed. And that is when Aries uses the element of fire to shoot out from the ground and eject itself with initiating energy through the soil, through the dirt, through the crust of the earth, up until it can reach the sun. So it's kind of two elements of fire you've got going on. There needs to be life within the seed for it like inner fire, like something that within its own self, almost like everlasting life, needs to initiate itself and eject itself so that it can reach sustaining life, which would be the sun. So when you have someone with the sun in Aries, everyone has every zodiacal element within them. So find out where Aries lands in your chart. This is where you have the capacity to take deep energy, deep initiatory action towards something. It's almost like you're running towards new growth because you know it depends on you to make that forward motion. It's a very Mars energy because you need to get past a certain barrier, you know, this being like in the instance of Aries or like the growth of a seed, it has to get past the dirt in order to reach the sun. So it's like moving from its own energy. So Aries energy can be fire, it can be aggressive because it knows it's got to keep going. But the gift energy of Aries is that it's got warrior energy because it knows that the entire life cycle of the human collective, its own life, the plant, whatever kind of like example you want to give to it, depends on its ability to keep going. And so you can depend on Aries energy to carry forward in whatever capacity it's working on. The superpower level of Aries energy is almost like the hero that will charge into any scene to fulfill its mission. It's like very bravery energy. It can be aggressive. It can be almost aloof because it's just, you know, it's got its own mission and it's kind of like not worried about what other people are up to, but it's the initiator. It's assertive and it's fiery, and it's a cardinal energy because it's the beginning of spring. Cardinal energy means it's the beginning of a season, so it's got a job to do. It's got an initiation. It's forward moving energy, you know. And so the energy of Aries is pure energy. It's a straight line. It's moving, and it is taking it somewhere. So then we come to, if you're thinking about the seasons, you know, with Aries being in late March throughout like the middle of April, then we transition into Taurus energy, which after Aries has exhausted its fire energy and the shoot of the plant has gotten through the crust of the earth and it can reach the sun to get additional sustaining energy. It doesn't have to just work with its own internal energy anymore that kind of like was resident within that seed. We have Taurus, which is the sign of the bull. It is the energy of earth. It's where the plant, I use the analogy of gardening and plants so often because I think when we think of astrology, you know, we think of it as like, oh, the planets, the stars, it's very cosmic. We're looking at the cosmic clock. That's super true. But it's all kind of tied to the seasons of human consciousness, which we can see by using nature as our mirror. So if I didn't mention that in the beginning of the podcast, let me just make sure I definitely give the kind of marquee for the zodiac, that the system of the zodiac is the entire life cycle, the entire spectrum from life to death of the life cycle of human consciousness, how human consciousness initiates in the seed form and grows just like a plant would push its stalk through the earth, expand its leaves so it can gather more sunlight. And it's changing throughout the entire life cycle with the purpose of eventually producing a flower, donating pollen to the birds and bees in its environment, and eventually coalescing to a seed form so that when it dies, it sends its genetic information into the next life cycle. So the life cycle of human consciousness is what we're talking about in general in this episode. So Aries has pushed through the surface, and now we're in Taurus season. We're like really getting into like the heart of spring, whereas Aries was a cardinal sign initiating. Taurus is where we are a fixed sign. Like this is sustainment energy. This is clear foundation, stability. And it's also the second dimension. It's the surface area of the earth. It's when a plant wants to like really take in the sunlight. It wants to really just experience the materiality and sensorial pleasure of being above the surface on earth. So Taurus energy is grounded. It wants to, like a human Taurus energy, it wants to experience material pleasure. It wants to smell things. It wants to touch and feel. It wants to feel at home. It wants to eat good food. So really it's like this energy of just loving being on the planet, loving being on earth, and like enjoying its home environment. Some of the shadows of Taurus energy is like it could be a little bit stubborn, in terms of bull energy, but it's also very fertile energy. Like this is energy of like the mother sign, even though it's like a bull, is kind of the archetype associated with Taurus, but this is really fecundant, fertile energy, to kind of use like a 19th century word there. And so the gift of it is that it's very nurturing. It really wants like the plant life cycle to continue and grow its roots into the earth. And the superpower of Taurus is that it can just hold the material plane with such a stable energy that it's what's going to hold the plant throughout the rest of its life cycle, because it's locked in with its root system into the earth. And so without stable, fertile Taurus energy really nurturing the plant so that it can grow in its initial, spring season, the rest of the life cycle won't pop off. So beautiful, materially delicious sensorial pleasure Taurus energy then transforms into the third sign of the zodiac, Gemini, an air sign, the first mutable sign. So by the time we reach Gemini, we're like cresting to the end of spring. It's about to be summer, so it's an adaptable energy. It's the third dimension, volume. A Gemini wants to explore out into if you think of the dimension of volume, that's air. It wants to experience all different kinds of data points, a thirst for curiosity and knowledge, a desire to connect with lots of individuals, lots of people, deep networking energy in the sign of Gemini. It can get, in the shadow of Gemini, it can get a little distracted, a little bit ADHD, because it's trying to connect lots of data points that the sign of Gemini exactly is not going to string together and synthesize. That will happen later on in the life cycle of the zodiac and the life cycle of human consciousness. But Gemini is that voracious curiosity of what all is on earth for me to experience. So yeah, the shadow, like we talked about, a little bit scatterbrained and ADHD energy because it's just so curious. But the gift of Gemini is that its curiosity allows it to take in lots of different information. It's comfortable in conversation, kind of like if you have that friend who can just like strike up a conversation with anybody, that's Gemini energy. The superpower of this would be, it would be able to go into any culture, any domain of conversation and just be like, hey, what do we got going on here? I'm bringing my, just like vivacious, open, gregarious personality to this situation. And I'm here to dig into this conversation and figure out what you humans have to exchange with me. So, you always want to bring a good Gemini to a party if you're an introvert like myself. So then we're moving on to the sign of Cancer. This is the first water sign in the zodiac. And we can tie this to the dimension of the fourth dimension, the dimension of time. And so now we're back to another cardinal sign, because Cancer is the true beginning of summer. It's like we're really initiating what summer is. And so if you think about Aries being that initiating in spring. We've like popped out of the seed. We're onto the surface of the earth in Taurus. We've like really spread out on the earth. And in Gemini, we've like again done a very external exploration of what all is above the horizon, above the surface on the earth in the third dimension of volume. Well, now the sign of Cancer needs to coalesce all of that exploration, all of those data points that Gemini ran out and gathered for us, and it needs to make sense of them. It needs to like bring all of that external data inside and start to understand what is me if you're thinking about an individual. And this is where I'll add on another layer of kind of another facet of the sign of the system of the zodiac that's really fascinating. So we have 12 signs in the zodiac. And if we break them into 4, like we've done with Earth, with the elements of fire, earth, air, water, we have 3 sets of 4. So we have Aries, Taurus, and Gemini, Cancer, Leo, and Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. Then if we think about the energy of beginning, middle, and end, that's kind of like another big layer to this whole pie. And so that's where we think about the biological impulses of growth, the individuating impulses of growth, and the collective impulses of growth. And so when we think about the dimensions of the first dimension being a straight line, the second dimension being surface area, the third dimension being volume, and the fourth dimension being time, then we are thinking about this in 3 parts. The spring is really when we are biologically growing. We're not truly individuated yet, but we are moving in that direction. By the time we get to the season of Cancer, where we just mentioned, after the outward energy of Gemini, and Cancer is now an inward energy of water, it's emotional. It's like we're really understanding that here we are on Earth, like figuring out what it means to be human. And the sign of the Cancer being the crab, where you develop an actual boundary of your sense of self. It's almost like you build a home within your own soul, within your own body. Given the information that you gathered in Aries, Taurus, and Gemini, you're starting to make sense of all of this. So Cancer is kind of the culminating season of that biologic growth, where you're just really realizing how important it is to develop your own conception of who you are as an individual. So some of the shadows of Cancer are, maybe potentially overly emotional. Like it's a very intuitive sign, given that it's a water sign. It's very tied to the moon and the cycles of the moon. But, the gift of this is that it's a very empathic sign. And given that water sign emotionality, like the intuitive capabilities of Cancer, like these are people who have a lot of psychic capabilities. And the superpower is that through its development of its core sense of self, it's truly set up to move around in the world once it gains its own emotional mastery, to move around in the world with a very defined sense of who it is, because it has taken that time to go inward and truly understand who you are versus like what everything else is. It's like when Gemini went and explored all of the data points in the world, Cancer sorted out what of that is meant for that individual, meant for your sense of self, and what can be discarded and is just data points that don't have to do with who you truly are. So now we've kind of covered that biologic sense of development where, we're really running on our instinctual sort of DNA that causes us to grow without us like really getting very, we're not letting things get too deep. But in the sign of Leo, that is where we start to truly take a hold of our own individuation. And the sign of Leo is another fire sign. It's another fixed sign. Here we're in the middle of summer. We're in a period of sustainment where we're really like, okay, Cancer gave us that first flavor of who we truly are as an individual. It's where we built the shell around us to give us a safe home within ourselves, to be ourselves. Now, Leo being a fire sign, it wants to go out into the world and show the world who you really are. Leos are very creative. creative. They're very outspoken. I always use J-Lo as my example of like the ultimate Leo. She's out there just like creating all over the place, being the most J-Lo she can be. And so the mission of a Leo in life is to really go out and explore all of the dimensions of showing its individuality to the world. And so some of the, shadows of that is it can be a little dramatic because it's a fire sign. It's a vulnerable thing to show your individuality to the world, but it has this fiery, impulse to do that. And because it's a fixed sign, it has that sense of stability in itself because it's gone through that entire biologic development phase from Aries through Cancer, where it now has its roots that it developed in Taurus. It understands kind of like what's out in the world because it explored in Gemini, and it truly made its initial sense of home in itself in the water sign of Cancer. And so, the superpower of Leo is that it has that internal fire that it will allow it to give itself the boldness to go out and express its individuality through creativity. And so then we get, as we are closing up the end of summer and just kind of the hints of fall are beginning to arrive in the seasons, we get to the close of summer in the sign of Virgo, which is another earth sign. And so when we get to Virgo, the interesting thing about, if you think about a Leo who's gone out and just exposed its creativity, it's sung its songs, it's read its poems at open mic nights, it's acted in movies, it's expressed itself emotionally to its friend groups and partners in love. It has really just done all it could do to be an individual. Well, you can't keep forward motion going out infinitely into space. At some point you need to, because astrology is based on spirals and cycles, you can't go out forever. You eventually have to come back to the center. Virgo is that earth sign where you return back to the center. So if you think about, like, say J-Lo had a crazy year and some of her movies flopped and she had things going on in the tabloids, what a J-Lo would want to do in that scenario is kind of become a Beyonce. Beyonce is a Virgo. She's very analytical and moves inward to truly understand all of the experiences that she had from displaying herself through creativity. And now it's time to really make sense of that, fine tune it. That's why Virgo energy is it's analytical, but in a practical sense. It's analytical because it knows it needs to refine, refurbish, remodel some of the ways of being that it experienced potentially negatively in Leo, and redefine its sense of individuality from a practical standpoint before it returns to exposing itself to the collective in the sign of Libra. That's when we truly get into fall. So Virgo is a mutable sign, which means it's, again, adaptable energy. We're not at the total beginning of fall yet, but we realize like summer's winding down. And so it's like, okay, we need to take stock of everything that happened in the summer season of our growth as an individual, being in Leo and Cancer, when we really, in Cancer, got the gist of who we are as individuals, and then in Leo displayed that for the world. And now in Virgo, we're like, all right, before we need to come back inward and reassess and reconfigure ourselves before we feel comfortable going out and exposing ourselves to the world again. And so that brings us to Libra, which is the second air sign. It's a cardinal sign because now we are in the fall solstice. We are initiating fall energy, and it is another sign of the third dimension of volume, where we want to go back out after after Virgo season, where we were really kind of like fine tuning our inner world again in a practical sense. Now we're ready to, once we did that, we're ready to go back out into the collective. And so Libra is the sign of the scales. It wants balance. It wants to enjoy beauty and harmony within collective environments, within groups. It's the harvest season. You're meeting up with people for parties. If it was an agricultural society where you're like, okay, the heat of summer is over. We can go out and sit on patios and enjoy the fruits of everything we've cultivated. And so some of the shadows of Libra is, keeping the peace at all costs. And again, this isn't just talking to people who have Sun in Libra or Sun in any of the signs we've spoken about. Everyone has every sign of the zodiac in them, and you can find that based on where the cusps of the zodiac fall in your houses. So go to Starline, look up your birth chart, because all of this will be just laid out for you in the most hyper-personal sense there is there. And so talking about the shadows of Libra and it being kind of like people pleaser energy. Libras often have a curriculum to learn that yes, harmony is beautiful and we want to keep the peace in group dynamics, but we truly at the highest want sustainable peace. And what does sustainable peace require? It requires honesty, and it requires calling toxic energies out when they are bringing unsustainable energy to group environments, because if you have toxic, imbalanced energies, we're not going to be able to continue the peace forever. And so that is often a big curriculum that Libra energy learns, wherever that may fall in your chart. And so after this season of like group celebration, beauty, Venus loves to spend time in Libra, we then move into the true, like full essence of fall in Scorpio season. So now we are really in a season of transformation. And Scorpio is the master transformer because it smells the death of winter that is coming, and it has to prepare. This is when plants, they've finished their fruiting life cycle, their flowering life cycle, and the seeds are preparing themselves to be dropped so that they can devote what they've learned from going inwards to contribute to the next life cycle that will come after the dead of winter. And so the Scorpio is another water sign. It's the second water sign in the system of the zodiac. And so water again has that dimensionality of time, where Scorpio really is going back and seeing, through the spring, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, then summer, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, all of the aspects and lessons and phases of becoming an individual and growing that it experienced, and then its initiation out into the public sphere as Leo released its creativity into the public domain, and then Virgo reacted from whatever happened through those Leo experiences, and then Libra reasserted itself out into the collective dimension. Scorpio is like making sense of all of that. It's truly experienced the gamut of human experience in groups, in deep personal relationships. Scorpio does not want to stay at the surface. It wants to go deep inside of itself. It wants to scuba dive to its own subconscious depths so that it can truly make sense. It's a detective sign. It wants to get under the surface so that it can actually string together the full power of the breadth of human experience. And so one of the challenges of Scorpio is that in that experience of scuba diving to the depths of its own self, can it maintain the sense of purpose, the full life cycle of a Scorpio's purpose, which is to let parts of itself die so it can rebirth itself into new awareness, new levels of consciousness? And so when you're at that scuba diving kind of like in your depths, can you actually stop, get a sense of stability and calmness, and look around and see what your depths have to show you? That can be really challenging for a Scorpio, because if you're wherever you have Scorpio in your chart, if it's your first rodeo with letting parts of yourself die, it can be super disconcerting. It can really shake you to the core, because you can't exactly know what is going to be reborn when you emerge back to the surface. And, using the scuba diving analogy, to successfully make the journey back to the surface is a challenging task. You don't want to get the bends. You don't want to come up too soon. You don't want to get scared when you get to the bottom and just say, abandon, your mission of scuba diving your depths and let's just go up to the surface too quickly. That can be destabilizing as well. So a practiced Scorpio who has gone through many seasons of initiation, of letting things die in their lives, realizing that because it understands cycles deeply, like it does not need to know what exactly is going to come in the season of new rebirth. It just knows that there always will be a new season of rebirth. And so that's really the superpower of Scorpio. And after understanding its own deaths of different parts of itself and experiencing new births of itself, which are totally unpredictable and always new, what it then can start to understand is that humanity as a collective, we have that ability within the entire human collective. The human collective has a deep, deep, vast subconscious and unconscious, of unconscious desires, conscious dreams, unconscious purpose that is yet to be harnessed. And the Scorpio is, once it has done that process enough for itself, it then can dedicate its ability to let things die and survive that scuba journey from the depths back to the surface again, and start to piece together and conceive of humanity's entire well of deep power that is yet untapped. And where does that lead? It leads into Sagittarius season, another fire sign, the last fire sign in the zodiac, a mutable sign as well, because that's when we're truly into fall. It's the, we are not at the, we're basically at the end of fall, and we know at that point that winter is absolutely coming. So it's an adaptable energy. And again, because it's a fire sign, it has that initiation, it has that exploratory energy. And so Sagittarius has that power that Scorpio has scuba dived into the surface with, and truly understood the vast storehouses of power that really lie at the disposal of the human collective when we learn how to use them. And that's where we'll get into as we now discuss the collectivity and that third and final phase of growth. Because in Leo, Virgo, Libra, and Scorpio, there we are understanding growth as an individual. We are figuring out exactly who we are. We're fine-tuning who we are. We're expressing our creativity into the external world and doing that in groups. And then in Scorpio, that's where we really understand the power of the human group as an entire collective. Now, when we move into Sagittarius through Pisces, the last 4 signs of the zodiac, that's where we figure out what are we going to do with our human collective power. And it comes through the experience of an individual figuring this out for themselves. And so in the sign of Sagittarius, this is deeply insightful energy where a Sagittarius can dream out into the future with its fire energy. It's the sign of the archer, where if you think about an archer that is really focused with its one arrow and it pulls the arrow back, the power in that arm that's pulling back the arrow is the power of Scorpio, because it's got the entire awareness, the conceptual awareness of the untapped power of the human collective unconscious that becomes the muscle and the force that will shoot that arrow out into the cosmos, into new visions for humanity. And that's really like the highest power of Sagittarius. The shadows can be, like too scatterbrained, like mega ADHD. Sagittarius is the opposite sign of Gemini. So if Gemini was the sign in the spring where we were gathering our first awarenesses of everything that's in the external world, thirst for knowledge, Sagittarius is the synthesizer of all of that knowledge. So it loves to dig into deep higher learning, but it can get so crazy curious about everything that exists for us to understand in this world that it may lack the ability to remember. Like when you go deep into subjects and really dedicate yourself to things like with full concentration, that's when you really use their power. That's when your one arrow goes far and hits its target. So for wherever you have Sagittarius energy in your chart, look to where you might get a little too crazy curious. I know I'm a Sagittarius rising, and I have Neptune and Uranus in Sagittarius, so I've started a lot of DIY projects that I haven't finished. But once I learned my Sagittarius lessons, I learned to dedicate my concentration on anything I'm deeply passionate about, so I can really synthesize those lessons and be part of the human collective that are bringing the new into the world. Because again, now once we enter the realm of Sagittarius and onward, we're talking about how does our individuality that we've mastered by the time we got into Scorpio become in service to the collective. And that leads us to the sign of Capricorn, the winter solstice. It is a cardinal sign because it's the initiating energy of winter. It's when we're truly in wintertime energy. And it is another earth sign. So it's the last earth sign. It is the most stable and most practiced, most just mature of all of the earth signs when it's guarded to its highest capability. The shadows of Capricorn has probably been talked about plenty already in Instagram astrology, because Pluto is leaving Capricorn in a few weeks. And so we've been in an almost 20, 15, 16 year cycle of being in Pluto and Capricorn energy, where again, the shadows are like overly excited and dependent and valuing materiality. And when it's not tied to Why are material structures good for the collective? That's when Capricorn energy can get a little shadowy and a little shady. It can be excessively pursuing material gains, finding like wanting to just stockpile and hoard money. Big Kardashian energy, although no shade to them. I don't know them personally, obviously. But, what are the beauties of Capricorn energy? Because a mature Capricorn is big emperor energy, but emperor energy in its healthy divine masculine state where it's grounded in the earth because it's gone through all the signs that we've talked about, and I won't repeat them again, but it wants to build for the collective. So Capricorn energy is like when you understand what's going on, you've gotten that cosmic seeded energy from Sagittarius, and you're like, okay, I see that vision for humanity. I'm going to begin the building process of it. Capricorn energy is like where you would build the like structures that you figure them out so that then they can be democratized and spread with the air energy of Aquarius. But it requires kind of like deep divine masculine Capricornian emperor energy to like have the sustainment, have the perseverance of building energy, and always understanding the big why, holding that vision for the human collective of what's really good for the next phase of human consciousness, and then building the systems and structure that would allow that to be, birthed throughout all of human society. We probably never lived through like a whole human collective experience of that yet. But, if you have Capricorn energy, that's a great place to go look into whatever house that's in and think, how can I be a builder of the next truly aligned structures that benefit the next level of human consciousness? And then what do we do with that? We move into Aquarius. We're in the middle of winter. It's fixed energy, it's sustainment, but it's also air energy. So again, that third dimension of volume. We want to take whatever structures, if they are the highest aligned, high frequency structures that we hopefully get from truly divine masculine emperor Capricorn energy. Imagine we built something like that. And I know if you check your phone, that's not what the news looks like. But let's just imagine for a second that it was. Aquarius energy would be, aha, now we want to distribute this throughout the human collective so everyone can enjoy the safety and the structure that healthy structures give us, because Aquarian energy wants to be in that level of, if it had good safe structures, it could democratize innovation for the entire world and really just be at the highest level of Uranian innovation and bringing in new consciousness for the human collective. The shadows of Aquarian energy can be that it can be detached, because Aquarian energy, it does have deep empathy because it's thinking really about the collective. It might not have empathy for like individual. I'm not saying Aquarius people aren't empathetic. Everybody has every energy within them, but Aquarian energy is like high intuitive empathy of innovation for the whole human collective. Because again, if we think about the system of the zodiac as a wheel, as a circle, as a cycle, Aquarius is almost at the end of the cycle. The next sign, Pisces, is the end of the wheel. So if it successfully integrated the awareness of every season and cycle and sign before that, that's highly mature energy that is grounded and aware enough of its own individuality and deeply in love with the human collective, such that it can sustain channeling from the cosmos. What is the next level of human consciousness that makes sense for our level of development as a human collective? So it's going to be interesting as we are entering, over the next 100 years or so, like the true, real, beginning of the age of Aquarius. And some say it's already begun, but as we like really deepen into it, because we never change, ages of the precession of the equinox. It's not like you flip a switch. Everything is like, again, mutable energy, as we've talked about in these signs. And so Aquarians, like, they're very innovative. They're very Uranian. They can dream deep into the future and understand what would it be like if humanity had the right systems to allow us to be effortlessly creative, effortlessly living in kind of like a utopic state, which who knows what that would even look like. But those are the people who want to seed that energy onto the earth. And then we get into the last sign of the zodiac, Pisces, the last water sign and a mutable sign, because Pisces is the end of winter. It's not quite into Aries yet. It's really where the seed has formed, and it is aware that the cycle has ended, but it is the beginning of a new cycle that Aries will eventually initiate. So it's being a water sign, it's highly intuitive. It's like really like feeling into the entire collective of humanity. Wherever you have Pisces energy, you probably almost like dissolve your boundaries of like feeling where your energy begins and ends and another person's, begins and ends as well. It's like empathy for the entire human collective. And some of the shadows of it is, again, it can like lose its boundaries. Dissolution of boundaries can make it feel lost and like just drowning in empathy. But, again, like our wounds are always where we find our greatest gifts. So when you really realize that in that Piscean energy, it's not truly an end. It's the wrapping up of a cycle so that a new cycle can begin again and learn from everything that happened in the previous cycle to seed new consciousness in the new cycle when Aries begins again in the spring. And so we just traveled through the entire 12 signs of the zodiac. I'm surprised I got through that as quickly as I did. But what can you learn from this? So we just went through all of those archetypes that are really tied to the seasons of nature. And so my invitation to you as we kind of wrap up this talk about the zodiac is to look into as you move in your life through different seasons. I'm recording this in Scorpio season. We're in the deep part of fall. We're in a season of transformation. Really use each season to be like, what part of my chart has this energy? Where can I develop this part of my life, this phase of my human development that's always looking towards how am I stacking my capabilities, growing my consciousness so that I can become a more activated, individualized, discerned creator being in this world? But how can I be in tune with the energy of nature as it is presenting itself in this space and time, knowing that new energy is always coming because we live in cycles. And so that's, really what I hope you get from this is find where you have the energy of the current zodiac sign that we're in when you listen to this episode. And then also remember that you have all of these signs within you. Astrology is not just about where your sun sign is or where your moon or your rising sign is. It's really about like leaning into understanding that you have all of it in you. And as we move through every year, as you move through many, many, many cycles, you can get to know each flavor of yourself and contextualize it and make it more usable and make it more tunable as you understand that every archetype, every sign, every planet has a shadow, a gift, and a superpower. And that frequency range is really that spiral staircase that allows you to understand to keep growing as you keep going. You can always find where you have shadows and like thank them deeply for being the lessons that like taught you the duality of like light and dark. If there was no darkness, we wouldn't understand the light capabilities within ourselves. And so all of this is a map of human consciousness. And my invitation within the tools I make and why I talk about astrology is that the topic of consciousness is rapidly becoming more democratized. It's flooding into the zeitgeist. And we are, 1,000 years ago, people didn't have the safety and space to work on their individual consciousness. And in many places in the world, in the West, if you're lucky enough to have the safety and space of your own home and enough personal free time, one of the best things you can do to make the world a better place for everyone is to work on your own consciousness and to have personalized tools like astrology that allow you to understand that you're part of nature, that allow you to understand that you can become a creator being. You can take control over what you can actually work with, which is your own consciousness, and make strides, make moves to move into your own growth. And through just making that a process that lasts your entire life, your ability to contribute to the collective by first being someone who is guarding their true individuality is deeply in service to everyone. And the life cycle of human consciousness, as we just walked through in the sign of in the wheel of the zodiac, is a beautiful way to understand growth, life cycles, how everybody is so uniquely special because we all have all of these zodiac signs configured in us differently. And so the self-love and self-awareness that you get from understanding yourself is so powerful, and then allowing you to become mesmerized by the beauty of other people's individuality. And so that's what archetypes do for us. They really help us learn at such deeper levels of specificity all of the different patterns of human characteristics, and just universal ways of being that are true in any culture, in any time, and in any era or eon. And, as you know, the name of the game of astrology is evolution. So I wish you the best of luck on your journey of individualizing your own evolution. And then once you really get the hang of it, how you would dedicate, the capabilities and abundance of your own individualization to the collective. So that's it for me today. And thank you so much if you listened this far. I truly appreciate you. Toodles.